Open up, Mr. Harris. Your wife is being taken into custody. The fists hammering against the front door weren't random knocks. They were timed, forceful, like nails being driven into my ribs. Each strike rattled the picture frames until one slid crooked on the wall. Hollowbrook Estates wasn't supposed to sound like this. At this hour, kids should have been wrapping up homework, sprinklers ticking across lawns, porch lamps blinking on one by one. But that voice outside cut through the night like a blade, cold, official, turning my quiet street into a crime scene before anything even began. I unlatched the door, and there they stood. Three of them, shoulder to shoulder, pressed uniforms as sharp as glass. Midnight blue fabric, brass insignias polished to a gleam, pistols already aimed without hesitation. Dark glasses hid their eyes even though night had already fallen. No courtesy, no forced politeness, just silence heavy enough to smother the air. The leader stepped forward, boots crunching the gravel as his voice snapped, rigid as steel. "Move aside, sir. She's leaving with us." For a heartbeat, I locked up. My thoughts spun. Why her? Why tonight? Their posture screamed certainty, as if the outcome was already sealed. Their weapons were steady, their presence choking. But what they didn't grasp was that my wife wasn't some trembling bystander hiding behind me. She wasn't prey to be carried off under threats and theatrics. She carried a uniform too, one stitched with power they couldn't counterfeit. And when she stepped into the doorway, everything they believed about rank and control began to crumble. Because the instant she revealed the truth of who she was, their badges, their guns, their entire charade would disintegrate. 3 months earlier, Hollowbrook Estates had felt like the reset we needed. Claire and I had moved enough times to know the grind, and when we signed the deed to the place on Willow Lane, we thought we'd finally found stillness. The neighborhood seemed right out of a catalog. Perfect hedges, neighbors who waved, kids darting down sidewalks on scooters. Safe, simple, ordinary. Almost too ordinary. From the beginning, the homeowners board made its presence loud and clear. Notes in our mailbox every other day, cloaked in formal wording, but dripping with pettiness. Your mailbox is 2 inches too tall. Your shrubs are uneven. Your front light is not HOA compliant. And then came the insult, a $90 fine for a garden banner Claire had hung by the porch. It was striped in red and blue with a hawk soaring across it. The kind of decoration it would be proud to show. But in Hollowbrook Estates, it was declared a violation of visual harmony. Margaret, the HOA president, made it her crusade to enforce those absurd rules. She strutted around with a clipboard tucked under her arm like she was commanding a battalion. But behind her syrupy smiles and mock authority, there was something off. She relished control, even if it only stretched as far as mailbox paint and lawn ornaments. Claire brushed it all off with ease. She'd laugh, shake her head, and mutter, "They truly don't know who they're provoking." I thought she was joking, just venting harmlessly. But then I noticed how she handled the notices, studying them, filing each one carefully, as if she were cataloging evidence. No anger, no fear, just quiet readiness. Because what Margaret and her little board didn't know, what nobody in this neighborhood understood, was that Claire wasn't just another homeowner. She wasn't just my wife. She carried a position that held real weight, the kind of role that could halt conversations mid-sentence with a single word. She never boasted, never dropped hints at barbecues or block parties. But little by little, I realized she was waiting. Waiting for someone to cross the line. That line had finally been crossed. The night fists thundered against our door. I knew Margaret had escalated. Parking tickets and warning slips were one thing. Sending men in uniform, or men pretending to be, was a different beast entirely. The three figures on my porch looked too pristine, too staged. Their boots barely scuffed, their badges polished like fresh props. But with pistols raised, the illusion was convincing enough to unnerve anyone. "Stand aside, sir. Your wife is under arrest," the leader repeated, his tone robotic, as if reciting from a poorly rehearsed script. Claire was still deeper in the house, but she'd heard everything. Her steps echoed forward, steady and controlled. She appeared in the entryway, not in nightclothes or weekend wear, but in her pressed official uniform. She hadn't chosen it by accident. The three impostors froze. Their gazes snapped from the insignia on her chest to the bars on her sleeve, then to the unwavering calm etched across her face. For a moment, silence pressed heavier than their guns. "Ma'am," one of them faltered, "you'll need to come with us." Claire didn't flinch, didn't blink. She simply said, "Lower your weapons." Her voice wasn't raised, but it sliced through the night like glass. The men froze mid-motion. The slightest flicker in their hands betrayed them. They weren't prepared for someone who carried more authority than they did. Margaret's outline appeared on the sidewalk, clipboard clutched tight, her lips curled in a smug little grin. She thought she'd won, that her petty HOA campaign had reached its triumph. But when her eyes caught the hesitation in the men, when she saw Claire's insignia gleam beneath the porch lamp, that grin slid away like melting wax. It struck me then. Claire had been waiting for this all along. The citations, the threats, the warnings. She hadn't fought them. She'd let them push, let them think they controlled the board. Because when it mattered, her authority wasn't symbolic. It was carved in stone, earned through years that none of them could touch. And now the imposters had stumbled into the one trap they could never wiggle free from. The air on that porch was heavy enough to crush lungs. 3 pistols were still aimed, but none of the men dared to squeeze a trigger. Claire didn't blink, didn't waver. Her uniform spoke louder than any argument. I said. She repeated, her tone measured and unyielding. Drop your weapons. The leader shifted, jaw clenched, his finger twitching near the trigger. His swagger had evaporated the moment Claire stepped into the doorway. She outranks us, doesn't she? One of them muttered. Claire stepped forward once, her boots sharp against the wood. Not just outranks, overrules. And you know it. That broke them. The man on the right lowered his pistol first, resting it gently on the railing. The second followed, hands raised in surrender. The leader resisted the longest, eyes locked, but Claire didn't flinch. She stared through him until his gun finally slipped from his grip and clattered to the porch. Now badges, she ordered. They hesitated again, but the truth was already scrawled across their faces. Those polished shields carried no weight. No seal, no number, no legitimacy. Just cheap replicas made for intimidation. One by one, the men unclipped their fake badges and let them fall at Claire's feet. From the sidewalk, Margaret's voice cut through the tension, sharp and shrill. What are you doing? Arrest her. She's the criminal here. She's... Enough, Claire snapped, slicing her words through the night. Her voice cracked like thunder across the quiet cul-de-sac. These men aren't officers. They're frauds. And you, Margaret, you sent them. Curtains shifted. Porch lamps flicked on. Up and down the block, neighbors leaned into windows or stepped onto porches. Margaret's stunt wasn't happening in the dark anymore. It was unfolding under a spotlight of curious eyes. Margaret stammered, trying to salvage her authority. But the sight of 3 armed men disarmed and exposed shouted louder than anything she could claim. The clipboard she clung to looked like cardboard now, pathetic against the shine of Claire's badge. I stepped closer to my wife, feeling the weight of the moment settle in. Margaret thought she could twist rules until they snapped, but Claire had shattered her entire little empire in seconds. And the best part, it was only the beginning of Margaret's downfall. By the time the 3 imposters were lined up at the edge of our lawn, hands clasped on their heads, the glow of red and blue finally spilled down the street. Real cruisers, real deputies, and Sheriff Collins himself stepping out, his face carved with the look of a man who already knew this wasn't just another routine call. He glanced once at Claire's credentials, then at the 3 disarmed men, and shook his head. Impersonating law enforcement, he muttered. That's a felony. His deputies swarmed in, snapping cuffs around wrists as neighbors murmured from their porches, cell phones raised high to capture every second. But Margaret wasn't done embarrassing herself. She stomped forward, face blotched crimson, finger jabbing at Claire. You can't arrest them. I gave the order. I run this community, and she refused to pay her fine. The sheriff turned his eyes on her, cool and steady. So let me get this straight. You sent armed men dressed as officers to someone's home over a $90 citation? Margaret froze, her mouth opening, but nothing came out. The crowd erupted in laughter and whispers, rippling like wildfire. Claire didn't have to say a word. Margaret was burying herself, one slip at a time. Ma'am, Sheriff Collins continued, his tone ironclad, you've just confessed to conspiracy. You're coming with us too. The look on Margaret's face at that moment was priceless. Her bravado cracked, her plastic authority crumbled, and all she could do was sputter as deputies took her by the arm. For months, she'd ruled through threats, fines, and false power. But under the wash of flashing lights, the truth had been laid bare for all to see. Margaret wasn't the queen of Hollowbrook Estates anymore. She was just another resident in handcuffs, and Claire stood taller than ever, unwavering. The HOA meeting that followed a week later bore no resemblance to the ones before. No smug speeches, no threats of penalties. Margaret wasn't there. She sat in county jail, facing charges of conspiracy and impersonation. The board sat quiet, humbled, their papers useless now that they could no longer be wielded as weapons. Neighbors who once whispered now spoke freely. They stopped me in the street to thank Claire, some apologizing for not standing up sooner. One elderly couple told me they'd been threatened with foreclosure over weeds. Another admitted Margaret had extorted donations for her so-called community improvement fund. It all came spilling out. As for Claire, she slipped back into her duties without flourish. She never bragged about her position, never waved her badge around. It wasn't about proving herself. It was about defending a line that should never have been crossed. That night, as we sat on our porch with the cicadas humming in the trees, I told her Margaret had chosen the wrong fight. Claire smiled faintly over her teacup. No, she said. She chose the wrong woman. And just like that, Margaret's reign in Hollowbrook Estates was over.